Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and following the 3H's of the channel. And I hope you're ready for this one, cause in this video, it's gonna get crazy. If that sounds like something you're interested in or want to be a part of, pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. So this didn't happen to me, it happened to my mother-in-law. So my mother-in-law lived in Uzbekistan in the 1970s. She always talks about how harsh life under the Soviet Union was. Her people are called the Saram. All of them were sent to Uzbekistan by Stalin because he was kind of schizoing out and thought that the Koreans were Japanese spies. Essentially, they were sentenced to Uzbekistan to die. And then my mother-in-law is born. Life is very hard. She loses 3 siblings to starvation and disease. When she is in her mid-20s, she has made a life for herself, finally. She has enough food, enough money, decent money. She starts having constant nightmares out of nowhere. She wakes up with a feeling of something sitting on her chest and keeps getting sick. One day, she decides to contact a sort of medium or whatever their version of it is that her friend told her about. The medium says that there is something attached to her that's eating her life force. They make a circle around my mother-in-law with salt and some type of herbs that the Uzbek considered sacred. The medium starts praying in Uzbek. My mother-in-law mostly speaks Russian and doesn't understand really anything. And then the medium breaks into Russian and starts calling out the presence in Russian. My mother-in-law and the medium both said that a small shadowy figure slowly appeared inside the circle. The figure can't leave the circle and seems to be in pain just by being out in the open. The medium yells something at it and swipes some of the salt and herbs away. The figure runs and vanishes into thin air. My mother-in-law these days believes that it was a demon or something of the like. She's super Christian now and is a big believer in prayer healing. Every time I say my back or something hurts or I have a sick stomach, she prays in Russian for my back to heal or for my stomach to get better. I love that woman. This is something that happened to me in 2019. I was living in a small town. It's kind of northern, so my town got hit by a massive blizzard. The power goes out. It's pitch black outside. The only light is from my flashlight. I decided to go outside and check on things. I put on all my winter gear and I head out into the storm. The snow was heavy. I can barely see anything. I'm trudging through the snow when I hear a strange noise. It sounds like a low growl or a moan. It's hard to differentiate. I shine my flashlight around, looking for the source of the noise. Suddenly I see something off in the distance. A tall, pale creature standing in the snow. I think, oh, shit. My heart starts pounding, but I can't look away. The creature starts moving toward me. At some point, I seem to break out of whatever spell I'm in. My instincts take over. I grab a nearby shovel. My adrenaline is pumping. I'm ready for battle. The creature gets closer. I can see more details. There's long, bony limbs, a blank face. There's no eyes, just a gaping mouth. It's terrifying looking. I think, this is it. I don't have time to run. I have to fight. The creature lunges at me. I swing the shovel with all my strength. I hit the creature right in the head. It collapses, almost lifeless. The adrenaline fades. The fear kicks back in. I think, what the hell did I just do? I leave it there. I run back to my house as hard as I can through the snow. I lock all the doors and basically hide under the blankets like a child. The power eventually comes back on. The storm subsides. I go back outside to see if this creature is still there. It's gone. There's just a pool of this black sludgy stuff remaining. Nobody believes my story. They think I'm crazy. But I know what I saw and what I hit. I never go out in the blizzards again, no matter what I hear. This is something that I still remember from when I was 13 years old. I was home alone. My parents are divorced, so this happened a lot. The house has always been not great and super creepy, but we're poor, and it's the best Mom can do. So I hear Mom knock on my door. She says, "Hey, come help me do the dishes." I thought, that's weird. I thought Mom was at work. I open the door. There's no one there. I look around my entire house. I'm alone. But now both cats all have their hair standing up, not making a sound, eyes darting around. And then suddenly, the wind picks up. The power goes out. This is Queens Creek, Arizona. Sandstorms are common, but I'm still getting really scared. I feel like that I can't breathe, and I'm suddenly really warm and dizzy. I feel like I want to fall down and go to sleep. I'm trying to walk, but I just stumble. Everything feels so weird. My head is ringing terribly. It's like I'm terrified, but my body isn't reacting like I am. I don't understand what's happening. And then I hear, "I'll be there soon." My mom is at the top of the stairs. I think I'll wait until she comes downstairs and I'll be fine. Suddenly, the front door unlocks. My mom walks in from downstairs. She looks at me funny. She says that I'm acting strange. I suddenly come to. I say it was nothing, that the storm just spooked me. Mom comes in and resets the breaker, and the power is back on. I tell Mom I love her. I cry alone in my room, but don't say anything. We can't afford to move. My mom is already stressed. The upstairs mom isn't talking anymore. Some other stuff would happen in the house from time to time, but that was the only incident that I really felt like that something malicious was in the house. I don't know what they are. Are they just spirits, or are they something else? Like an entity that comes and goes? I don't know. This is something that happened back in 2016. I met up with a group of friends. There was around 7 of us in total. We're all chilling, and we decide to have a smoke as someone has a couple cigarettes, someone else has a couple joints. And we decided that we wanted to head into a nearby trail that I know quite well, and one that I walk very often. We walked the trail for around 20 minutes in the dark, our phone flashlights illuminating our way. Eventually, we arrive at a clearing, and we all sit down in the middle of it. The 3 bigger guys are struggling for air. They're not in real good shape. We make fun of them for a bit, and then relax in the clearing. Everybody pulls out what they brought, and we all start smoking. After we finish the first pack, we all start screwing with each other, trying to scare one another in the woods. Typical shit, telling stories. Oh, what was that over there? Stuff like that. After a while, we notice that there's one friend who's been almost silent up until this point. He just points and says, "Do you guys see them too?" Now at first, I wanted to perceive this as a joke, but his tone was utterly serious and seemingly malicious almost. He genuinely creeps everyone out, but we shake it off with a simple, "Ha, good one, man. Stop screwing around, you're acting weird." He still sits there, stone-faced. He says, "I asked you guys a question. Look over at the far tree line. Do you see them?" We look around for a bit before one of our friends gasps and points out 6 different sets of colored lights at the tree line, all roughly 6 feet off the ground and roughly 10 feet apart. Are those eyes? Someone asks. They start to come towards us all at once. Their silhouettes visible in the moonlight. We immediately pack our shit up and start to head out. Everyone's walking pretty fast, almost at a jogging pace, except our friend who pointed it out. We eventually lose sight of him in the dark of the woods. We stand in an adjacent backyard to the mouth of the trail, waiting for him, assuming he's just a few feet behind us. Maybe he got lost. It's not a difficult trail. After about 10 anxious minutes, we begin to really panic and start to head into the woods to find him. At the deepest visible point of the trail, one pair of eyes becomes visible, sauntering into our field of view, very low to the forest floor. They hold their spot a bit before rising all the way up to the position that they were in when we saw them. We all sat there, transfixed. After seconds, we hear something barreling through the woods, loud thuds, limbs snapping, and leaves crumbling. The friend who we lost comes tumbling out of the woods. There's tears in his shirt. He's bleeding. His nose is bleeding. He's super pale. He stands up, dusts himself off, and walks toward us almost normally. He just says nonchalantly, I think we should go now, guys. There's no questions from me. We all head back to my house. Our friend kept his distance behind us the entire time, almost paranoid, always looking over his shoulder. All of us were freaked the F out. Once we arrived at my house, he said, I don't feel like hanging out anymore. I'm just gonna go, and got in his car and left. I only heard from him 4 or 5 more times after that. Each time was through a text or a Steam message. Twice I've tried to ask him about that night, what happened to him. It just says he's typing and then stops and he never responds. I haven't heard from him in roughly a year now. He doesn't use any form of social media anymore, and he hasn't been on Steam in over a year. None of my friends will talk about that night, and they also never bring up our friend who just disappeared for a while that evening. They just try to forget the whole thing without ever addressing it. To start off, I don't care if you believe me. This whole thing is going to sound completely unreal, almost like a fever dream. Nobody believes me, but someone might know just what the hell happened here. So I had turned 19. I decided to go visit my grandfather in northern Michigan. A bit of backstory about my grandfather. He lives in a cabin like a pioneer. I never really knew him too well. I only saw him once every few years. All I really know about him is that back in the 70s, he was in Vietnam. When I was 17, he confessed to me that he felt terrible about the things that he had to do there. Apparently, he was told to beat somebody to death with a shovel. After that, I kind of avoided him. I was too freaked out to talk to him, especially since he was clearly unstable. Old guilt caught up with him and kind of affected his mind. But now, he knew that he was nearing the end of his life. He was having liver problems, and he refused medication. He invited me over, since I'm his last living relative, and he wants to spend some time with me before he passes. At first, I was hesitant, but I decided that this is what my father would have wanted. After about 3 hours of driving, I get to his cabin. It's a nice place. It looked almost like it was made out of Lincoln logs or something. He's waiting outside on his cabin porch. He's smoking a pipe and rocking in a chair. He looks straight out of a cartoon, suspenders and all, like somebody you'd see who's a stereotype of a pioneer, or just old farmer guy, but he looks exhausted. I can see dark circles under his saggy eyes. He gets up and gives me a big bear hug. He's trying to hug me as hard as he can, but he can clearly barely walk, and he's clearly weak. We hug for a few minutes, mostly because I find it too awkward to break away. I remind myself that even though I only remember him for a few years, he's known me most of his life. Halfway through, he starts kind of breathing heavy on me. He sniffles. I realize that he's been crying silently. Eventually, he breaks away, red-eyed. He says, "Come inside, son." I say, "Okay, Pa." I come inside to a very cozy cabin. It's getting cold, especially in Michigan, so he has the fire going. He has running water, a gas stove, and 2 beds. One of them is very new and good quality. I think he bought it just for me. When I get over the initial off-puttingness of his behavior, I begin to care for him. I kind of begin to remember my grandfather, if that makes sense. The bond of family becomes newly important. I decide to be his live-in helper until he dies that very day. He starts to make us some decaf, but halfway through, he starts to sweat. I help him to his chair by the fire, and I finish the coffee. My coffee tastes terrible, but he's still very appreciative. He assures me that it's delicious. After the decaf, we get ready for bed. He lies on the beat-up small bed and tells me to sleep on the new one. When I tell him we should switch, he refuses. I guess he did buy it for me. He says his prayers and he falls asleep. I can't stand watching this old dying man, my own flesh and blood, sleeping on that pile of junk. He's quite small and frail at his age, though not thin. With a bit of effort, I manage to lift him up gently and tuck him into the big bed. I move the small bed to the window and I make sure to sleep facing it. That way, the sun wakes me up. When the sun wakes me up, it's like 6 a.m. I slide the bed back and switch my grandpa back. I lay on the good bed for another 20 minutes before I realize I can't fall asleep again. All that lifting woke me up. I decide to just prepare breakfast and pack his pipe for him. I go to an outhouse near the cabin because the flushing might wake him up. When I'm done, I step outside. I notice something behind his cabin. It seems to be a gate holding 6 black horses. They're shackled in these massive metal chains. Each horse has a huge metal ring around their necks. They're all chained together and all to the ground. Since it's like 6 a.m. and the forest is dark, they look really creepy, like something straight out of hell. I thought that maybe it was a trick of the light, but their faces looked all kinds of screwed up. Their eyes looked almost red. I thought it might be just a reflection, like how cameras show red pupils. God, was I wrong. I stepped back inside to find my grandpa awake, sitting on his bed. I talked about what we were going to do for the day. He said his back felt good enough today that he might want to do some fishing. Not to stroke my own ego, but I attribute that to me letting him sleep on the good bed. Let me tell you, he might as well have been sleeping on the floor or whatever. After a breakfast of eggs and bacon, I drive him to a pond near the house. We fish for a while, silent the entire time. It wasn't awkward though. It was a comfortable silence. I didn't catch anything, but he caught a 3-pounder. I had to help him reel it in. He was very proud of himself, and that made me happy. He said that he used to love to go out fishing. I told him that we'd make it into dinner. On the drive back, I asked him about the horses. I had kind of forgotten about them since the early morning. Instantly, I knew I shouldn't have asked him. His cheerful smile was replaced with a kind of stern grin. He looked like he was forcing himself to maintain a rapidly fleeting smile. He told me not to worry about it, that they were just pets. I almost listened to him, except he nervously quivered when he said worry. Never happened before or after, so I doubt that it was just an old man thing. When we got back, he showed me how to gut and debone the fish. We marinated it in a dry rub for about 30 minutes while he took a break to puff on his pipe. While he was doing that, I opened the curtains to the back window and peered at the horses. They hadn't moved at all. They hadn't eaten or slept. They didn't look cold, but they were still shooting hot breath from their nose. I know because it was cold. I saw it. I stepped outside to talk to my grandpa about the horses. I said, "Pa, did you forget to feed the horses or something?" He says, "You don't feed these horses, son. Not this type." I had no clue what he meant by that. Every time I tried to ask, he would just ignore me or change the subject. When he was done, we stepped inside and had our dinner. I noticed he prayed extra long that night. Fast forward to the next morning. I just woke up with the sun, and I put my grandpa back into his bed. I decided to get a bit closer to the horses this time. I got just barely close enough so I could see them. I don't think they noticed me. Remembering it now sends shivers down my spine. It was just as terrifying as I initially thought, if not more so. They had shaggy, matted fur, deformed and bent out of shape skulls. I know 100% that their rib cages should not have been indented like that. Their teeth looked like they had been chewing on rocks or something. It wasn't just their appearance, though. I've been around deformed animals before. It doesn't really bother me so much. But these things had a really screwed up presence, like the feeling in your stomach after you watch some really screwed up things on the internet, or like you see someone die. Initially, I felt bad for them, but now I just wanted to not see them. Strangely, however, I also wanted to get closer. Just being around them made me weak in the knees. I couldn't do it. One of them looked me in the eyes, and if I hadn't just used the bathroom, I probably would have shit myself. I ran back into the cabin and hid. Grandpa was just starting to awake, so I tried to forget about it and get to work. Today was a supply day, meaning that we were going to go into town to refill on food, firewood, toiletries, etc. I decided to buy Grandpa a cake too, not for any special reason, just that it's important to have some fun while he could. Usually, he just got someone to deliver him food, but it was good to get some exercise. Plus, his back was feeling better. We rode into town, and Grandpa said that he was getting sick. The poor guy hadn't been in a car for years, I don't think. Motion sickness really got to him, and we had to pull over. After that, I realized that we had to go quick. We got to a giant, but I think they call them something else there, a good and plenty, or something like that. We pick everything up, and I hide the cake from Grandpa to surprise him with it at the cabin. When we get back, something is wrong. I feel that same stomach feeling. There's a racket coming from the back of the cabin. I pull the car up and step outside. These horses are going nuts. Littered on the floor behind them are some kind of white balls. Grandpa tells me very sternly to get in the effing cabin. I say, "Shouldn't we drive away?" And he said, "Son, the worst thing we could do right now is try to escape." I have no clue what the hell he's on about. When we get inside, he starts explaining. Now remember, he's an old man, and he's injured, so I can barely understand him. He starts talking about how he didn't know that they were there when he bought the cabin. If he leaves, he's gonna die. They must have eaten something. From what I can piece together through everything he told me, If you feed them, they get stronger, and they can lure things in better. Once one of them got a bite, they got just enough strength to lure in more and more. He said the most we can do is hope they run out of things to eat. And then there was a snap. A loud crack, like a whip, snaps through the air. Grandpa goes silent. I say, "What the hell was that, Pa?" He stares at me, kind of empty-like. Looking back at it, he was accepting his death. He said one of them broke the chains. I said, "What the hell are you talking about? What the F?" He looks at me with a kind of pain in his eyes. He says, "Behind you." I whip around, facing the building. He says, "You're a good kid, Sonny." And then I lose consciousness. Everything goes black until I come to with the sun beaming on my face. I wake up in a pile of my own blood. There's a crowbar at my side. My head aches terribly. I touch the back of my head. It's just a flesh wound. I pick myself up and try not to vomit. I fail. I sit down and try to come to. Everything aches. I'm freezing. And then I think, wait, why am I freezing? The right wall of the cabin is full of holes. It looks like someone threw boulders through the wall. I think, what the hell's going on? Where's Grandpa? There's no sign of him. In fact, there's no sign of anything. I open the door and step outside. I check behind and the gates have been trampled. The chains are broken. I get closer. Those white things that were crushed up were rabbits. The horses half chewed them and then spit them out. I start to piece everything together and promptly vomit again. Long story short, I walked back to the cabin and picked up a few things. I picked up my grandpa's pipe and his bluegrass tobacco. I found a golden cross that he kept in his cabinet. I drove home without stopping. The next day, I called a delivery boy and I asked him to deliver to the house so I could see if I dreamed the whole thing. After a while, he calls me and asks me what house I was talking about. He said that there used to be a house there, but it's been burned down for years. Guys, I have no idea what the hell happened that day. I'm sitting here, smoking his pipe. Honestly, it's the only proof I have that any of this had ever happened. My therapist can't explain it since I literally have his pipe as physical evidence. My priest can't explain it since there's no records of demonic horses or anything as far as we know. My friends just tell me that I'm full of shit. I don't know what else to do. What the hell happened? So those were something else, weren't they? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own, or would you like to donate to the channel? I have links in the description below for all that stuff. And in the last video, I was supposed to put a picture up of something in one of the stories, and I forgot to, so I'll put it up right here. This was a rudimentary drawing of the entity from another story, and I figured that sometime, I've posted them online before, usually anonymously, but when I worked as a receiver, I used to hear some weird stories from like some of the drivers or whatever. Usually it'd be like the late night or really early morning ones. So I'll tell some of those in another video. And with that, I think I'll see you in the next one. I hope you have a good week, and I hope you had a good weekend. And let's hope that each day is better than the last. And with that, yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching.